Think of your favorite Marvel heroes. Maybe you love Spider-Man, one of the most iconic and well-known heroes to ever grace the silver screen.
Yeah, Spider-Man!
Maybe you're a huge fan of Iron Man, or you realized after Ragnarok that Thor was your favorite, like me.
Yeah!
Maybe you prefer villains, and you love big baddie Thanos or even the charming Killmonger.
What's up?
It's impossible these days to ignore these characters. They're everywhere. They make billions of dollars, and many are household names. But not so long ago, the future of Marvel and its heroes hung in the balance. In fact, the MCU may have never existed without a certain half-vampire, half-human black superhero. Yes, I am talking about Blade, the Daywalker, every vampire's worst nightmare, and star of the first successful movie that Marvel ever made. It's entirely possible that, like me, you didn't even realize he was a Marvel character. The R-rated feature was dark, gritty, stylish, and a ton of fun. It defined lead actor Wesley Snipes' career. Blade went from being a relatively unknown Marvel C-lister to surprising everyone when he made $131 million at the box office on just a $45 million budget. The movie spawned a trilogy that went on to earn a combined $415 million. It couldn't have come at a better time for Marvel, and in many ways, it saved Marvel's cinema prospects entirely, as well as revived the superhero genre. To understand why it was so impactful, we need to go back to the beginning of superhero movies. Superhero adaptations first started in the 1940s as serials, but didn't start making waves on the silver screen until the 70s and 80s, when Marvel's rival DC Comics achieved early critical success with Superman in 1978, Superman 2 in 1981, and Batman in 1989.
Fast forward to the 90s.
The superhero genre is in a bad place. DC had a string of misfires, with 1997's Batman and Robin nearly killing the genre entirely. Marvel made a Fantastic Four movie that was never released, and that's probably for the best. In fact, the only movie Marvel did release up to this point was 1986's Howard the Duck, a big-budget flop targeted toward children. I have absolutely no idea why this movie was made. It was also in the 90s that the comic bubble burst. The market was oversaturated. Publishers were putting out hundreds of new issues, most of which were embarrassingly bad. They also cost more than double in 1993 than what they used to in 1985. The public at large just didn't want to pick up expensive, bad comics. Interest in the genre waned. Things were looking pretty grim, especially for Marvel. So, how did it manage to turn things around? In 1993, Marvel assumed partial ownership of Toy Biz, which would receive exclusive rights to producing Marvel toys. That's when Toy Biz designer Avi Arad came in to guide Marvel Films, the company's restructured film studio. He was ambitious and, most importantly, saw the potential in superhero films. By the end of 1993, he licensed the X-Men out to 20th Century Fox. But despite Arad's best efforts, Marvel declared bankruptcy on December 27, 1996. Years of bad investments and bad decisions, coupled with the big hit from the comic bubble burst, finally caught up to the company. But Arad refused to give up on the potential of Marvel's characters, even being quoted as saying, "Spider-Man alone is worth $1 billion." He wasn't wrong. Having rebranded Marvel Films as Marvel Studios, just before bankruptcy, Marvel trudged onward, investing money in feature film production. Bankruptcy paid off Marvel's debts, but that wasn't enough to survive. For years, the company had been licensing out characters to other studios for quick cash. It was high time to get those films made and make Marvel a big name in Hollywood. The studio turned its attention to a relatively unknown character whose film development had been in limbo at New Line since 1992.
There are worse things out tonight than vampires.
Like what?
Like me.
Blade was the first film packaged and licensed by Marvel Studios. It was its first modern movie. That in itself is incredibly significant. Handling the script was burgeoning screenwriter David S. Goyer, who would go on to write Christopher Nolan's critically lauded Dark Knight trilogy. New Line brought Goyer in to adapt Blade into a campy vampire hunting movie. But the young writer had different plans. He wanted to take Blade seriously. Starring as Blade was, of course, Wesley Snipes. There probably hasn't been a more pitch-perfect superhero casting ever, except for maybe Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. Snipes lent an absolutely undeniable level of cool to the character. He took the character so seriously that you had no choice but to as well. Not to mention the fact that Snipes himself is an incredible martial artist who choreographed all of the film's fight scenes. Goyer and director Stephen Norrington made the decision to age up the film to appeal to adult comic fans. This wasn't a cute movie. It hit hard. It was seedy, grimy, gory, and, most importantly, grounded in a way that no superhero film had been before. Meanwhile, they efficiently established the inner workings of Blade's world, in which a hidden society of vampires pull all the strings from behind the scenes. It's a rich world, parallel to ours, similar enough to remind us of the world we inhabit, but full of otherworldly concepts in which the audience could lose itself. It was this kind of world building that would lend a significant amount of relatability to films like The Dark Knight and The Avengers. That world soon unveils an impressive roster of incredible supporting characters, from Blade's grizzled mentor Whistler, played by Chris Christopherson, to Stephen Dorff's sly Deacon Frost, a villainous vampire looking to upend the ancient vampire establishment and eliminate Blade, to Dr. Karen Jensen, a courageous hematologist portrayed by N'Bushe Wright, who saves Blade's life multiple times throughout the film. It had so many things going for it, so many pieces perfectly shifting into place. When Blade opened on August 21st, 1998, it made $131 million globally. Though it wasn't exactly critically acclaimed, it quickly became a cult classic. It was an oh moment for Marvel. The studio had finally scored its first hit. Here's the thing. Marvel only made about $25,000 off of Blade's box office returns. So it would be entirely incorrect to say that the Daywalker saved the company financially. Instead, Blade was more of a moral victory for Marvel, finally establishing it as a rising force in Hollywood. It demonstrated that audiences could be drawn towards Marvel's C-list characters. Just imagine what could happen if Marvel made a movie about an A-lister. In 1999, 1 year after Blade's release, Marvel sold the rights for Spider-Man to Sony. A year after that, in 2000, X-Men made its way out of development purgatory. It made almost $300 million at the international box office in 2000, but perhaps without the success of Blade, it would have remained in limbo for longer or forever. In 2002, Spider-Man, starring Tobey Maguire and directed by Sam Raimi, was released to critical acclaim and even larger box office numbers, over $800 million. Marvel was witnessing a stark upward trend, and it all began with Blade. But still, Marvel wasn't exactly profiting off of the successes of these films. $25,000 from Blade, nothing from X-Men due to a flat fee negotiation, and only about $62 million from the first two Spider-Man movies. A decent chunk of money, but it was chump change when you consider those two movies made over $3 billion. In 2003, a talent agent named David Maisel flew to Florida to have lunch with a Marvel executive, and he pitched a relatively simple but ground-shaking idea. Make the movies yourself and retain 100% of the profits. It was a few years later that the Marvel Studios we know and love today began to operate in earnest as an in-house production studio. When Iron Man was released in 2008, it was a smashing success, making about $600 million globally. After decades of bad decisions, bad luck, and finally, a stroke of success, starting with Blade, the door to the MCU finally opened. So, aside from being Marvel's first successful film, how do we qualify Blade's legacy on the MCU and the superhero genre? The most obvious example is probably in Blade's world building, which we've already highlighted in this video. For Blade, Goyer dreamt up a compelling and at times totally bonkers world that ran parallel to ours. Nearly every film in the MCU, even the most literal spaced out ones like Guardians of the Galaxy, relied on this approach to deliver a sense of relatability to the audience.
You're from Earth.
Not from Earth, I'm from Missouri.
Yeah, that's on Earth, dip.
Even X-Men, which followed Blade and is often considered to be the film that ushered in the modern era of superhero movies, took that page out of Blade's book. Blade also showed, more generally, that comics told genuinely great stories, and that if approached with some degree of relatability, a film about a vampire-slaying half-vampire could absolutely function as a summer blockbuster. In terms of casting, Blade was revolutionary in that Blade himself was tailored to fit Snipes' persona and strengths, not the other way around. In fact, when Blade himself debuted in 1973 in Tomb of Dracula #10, his original character was a far cry from the one portrayed in the film. Wesley Snipes is Blade, much in the same way that Robert Downey Jr. is Iron Man. The way that writers approach both characters has forever been changed by the way both actors molded the character around themselves. And we would be remiss to overlook Blade's role and representation on screen for black actors. When Black Panther was released in 2018, it was lauded, rightfully so, for its nearly all-black cast and crew. But many were quick to point out that this was not the first successful black-led superhero film, with Snipes and Blade changing the game as the first financially successful superhero film with a black lead 20 years prior. And again, we cannot overlook the fact that Dr. Karen Jensen was not exactly a love interest for Blade, but an independent black woman who saved Blade from certain death multiple times. She, maybe even more so than Blade, was ahead of her time. Blade also proved, long before Deadpool, that R-rated comic book movies could make serious bank at the box office. Fun fact, Ryan Reynolds plays a significant role in Blade Trinity, but apparently didn't get along with Snipes, or rather Blade, on set, having been quoted as saying, "I've never met Wesley Snipes, I've only met Blade." Who wouldn't want to meet Blade?
Came back to finish you off.
Get out of my way, you freak!
I would. While I was making this video, it occurred to me that Marvel's entire film catalog could be thought of as a house. Imagine a house. Think of all of Marvel's movies as a part of the house. All houses need walls and a roof. Those can be X-Men and Spider-Man, respectively. Perhaps the door to the house is Iron Man. Inside the house, the first Avengers movie is the pricey couch and chair set. The Guardians of the Galaxy is the weird vase on the mantle. The basement is full of weird things, like the second Thor movie and Avengers Age of Ultron. The sleek new Lexus in the garage is Black Panther. But every house begins with a foundation. That foundation is Blade. It's not the first thing people notice about a house. Most people wouldn't notice it at all, but it's there, doing its job, making sure the walls don't fall, that the roof stays attached, and all of your pretty things inside stay safe. Take away the foundation and the whole structure falls. Without the foundation established by Blade, it is entirely possible that Marvel may have never found its footing or the guts it needed to turn its bankruptcy into billions. So, what do you think? Do you agree with me or not? Do you want to see Blade slice his way into the MCU? Let us know in the comments below.